I wanted to address the questions first before we get into our panelist segments. So let me just make sure George is on the call, and I'm going to send. He's unmuted. So go on, George. Why don't you tell us about your question?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. George Winters here. Basically, I've tried, I think this is my question. I've got a SharePoint MOS 2007 set up with a single web front end. I'm preparing to have someone else come in and upgrade it to 2010. I've been looking at the ULS logs that SharePoint produces, and I see that there are undisposed objects. I know I've been programming against the web front end in PowerShell, and I suspect I haven't been doing it well enough to dispose of those objects, and that's where this is coming from. How do I get rid of them gently? Or how do I get rid of them at all? Anybody?
I could take that one if you want. That's Ed. Yes, if you undisposed objects usually refers to if you're programming SP site or SP web objects, you're creating new ones, I imagine, in your PowerShell script?
Not creating them, or not trying to create them, but rather accessing them.
Okay, well, I mean, I'll state it more generally. The case I generally see is if you're, say, programming in .NET or whatever,
right.
If you create new SP webs or new SP sites, if they are not literally disposed of properly, then that can cause the memory leaks or errors that you're seeing.
Okay.
Once they're there, like once the memory leaks have occurred, you're right, the only way to recover from that is to, well, you don't have to reboot the box, just simply restart the application pool would be sufficient. Other than that, it requires that when you are programming against the objects that you explicitly do a .dispose on them, or in C# we would incorporate them in a using statement. If we have custom code, and this wouldn't apply so much to PowerShell, just as a reminder, there's a tool out there called SP Dispose Check. That tool can help you, it will go through your code and make sure that you don't have any of these memory leaks.
But it won't. But of course, it won't solve the problem of a leak that's already occurred.
If it's already occurred, you're done. You would have to recycle the application pool to.
Now, how do I go about if I don't know how to recycle an application pool?
Oh, then reboot the box.
Yeah,
no.
I think I'm going to take the coward's way out and reboot the box.
If you have that option, fine. Otherwise, in more seriously, in IIS Manager, you can go to the application pools and you can simply restart them from there.
Right. And that will.
It basically
what's the impact
shuts.
on the end user?
Well, the end user is out of luck either way. The site will be out for the period of time that the application pool is recycling, which is short, versus the box rebooting, which would be longer. So obviously you might want to do this overnight, or the application pool recycling is fairly quick, but then what will happen is, the application has to restart, so there'll be some performance lag while it restarts.
Well, we do have a maintenance window in our production environment, and that's what where I'm looking to do this.
Yeah, reboot the box is the safe thing if you have the option. So.
Now you have you've used the plural boxes. I do have a web front end, and I have another computer running SQL Server.
Mm-hmm.
Do I need to restart them both? Is that good practice?
Just the web front end is fine. The SQL box should remain up and running.
Do I need to let it know that I'm restarting the web front end?
No, it's cool. It'll be totally fine.
Splendid. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Next.
Yeah. Can I just make one quick statement on this? And thanks, Ed. If I'm not wrong, IIS by default always recycles the app pool once a day unless you configure it not to do it. So if you left it at default settings, by default it's always doing it once a day already.
But by that token, then these objects should.
Right, but they are then reoccurring again the next day. So you probably have something else going on that's causing them to happen again the next day.
Well,
so
let me re-examine the logs, and
to
I'll.
add, to add to Ed's statement over here is you should look at your IS setting for the app pools, see at what time it recycles every day, and if you have it not set to do that, then obviously, you have to do it once. But I think by default, it always recycles app pools once a day always.
Okay, well, I will take a look at that and see. Thanks
Yep.
for that added information.
All right, thanks so much, George, for being the first one to submit your question on Facebook. And thanks, Nilesh and Ed, for your wonderful answer. So, just let you all know that if you have any questions as we are presenting, please submit your questions in the question box there, and we will address them. So moving on, we are going to actually come up to our first segment. And this one is going to feature John White and one of his recent his most recent blog entry, SharePoint 2010 Upgrade Breaks Microsoft Access Client Application. So I'm giving John the floor.
Exciting title, isn't it? It was actually my most recent one up until yesterday. It's just I like to use my blog primarily for incidents that I run across and just throw that up. Hopefully someone else winds up in the same situation. They'll see what I've managed to overcome. This one was a bit of a puzzler at first. It didn't take too long to sort out. We had a customer, a fairly large one, go through a 2007 to 2010 upgrade not too long ago. And everything looked okay, except one aspect of the site. We had some engineering users who, unbeknownst to us, were using the SharePoint lists from Microsoft Access. So to back that up, I don't know if everybody knows that this is possible, but Access can connect and use a SharePoint list as if it was native data, or almost as if it was native data in Access. And that's what they were doing for a number of things. This is distinct from the Access services that you see in 2010. You've been able to do this all along from 2007. And what they were noticing was that some of their lists or some of their Access databases, as they saw it, weren't working anymore, and they were getting very general errors. And that didn't make a ton of sense to us. And also, the behavior was different in 2007 and 2010 of versions of Access. 2010 didn't seem to have any problems where 2007 did on some of these lists. Walking through some of the lists that were in use on this site, we actually hit a more explicit error, and it's outlined on the blog. And if I just bring it up here, I'll remember what the error was. Basically, the error indicated that we had exceeded the lookup column threshold, and so we know what that's all about. And for those of you who may not, SharePoint 2010 introduced the concept of throttling to help protect other users of the server and the server from errant processes, bad programming, and bad design, basically. And one of these is the list view lookup threshold, and it's by default set to 8. And what that basically means is that any list is not allowed to have any more than 8 essentially lookup columns. Okay, and through the browser, the lists in questions were basically failing that test. They're not just lookup columns. Actually, what constitutes a lookup column in this case is your standard SharePoint lookup column, but also name and person fields and workflow status fields. And when you think about it, that makes sense because those fields are actually looking up from other lists. And in back end, basically, you're doing a very expensive SQL join, and that's why we have this list view, this list lookup threshold. There are other thresholds available through the application settings in Central Admin. How many items you can have in a list, show at one time from a list, and that can be controlled for users and administrators. But we had this threshold, but it wasn't consistent between what we were seeing in Access 2007 and the lists in the browser. Basically, more lists were being affected in 2007 Access, no lists were being affected in 2010 Access, and the ones you would expect were being affected in the browser. So as a temporary troubleshooting measure, we basically jacked that threshold from 8 up to 20, and magically everything worked. So what that basically indicated to us is access was certainly 2007 was hitting that limitation, although at a different place. So without having dug into it further, it would appear that access is doing a few more lookups in addition to what's happening in the browser, and that's been fixed in 2010. So if anybody ever sees that, it's almost an upgrade blocking capability. That was the problem.
Well, thanks for sharing that that problem. Has anyone else seen that problem as well?
This is Laura. I've reached the threshold before in 2010, and same thing. Just realized it was all the people fields and all the lookup fields, and yeah, that makes sense that it's all the workflow fields too. I didn't even think about that, but yeah, we had to go bump the threshold up.
Yeah. And ideally, you go back to the customer, say redesign your list, and hopefully they do it. But hey, or you go get bigger hardware as the bottom line.
How do you choose your threshold? Like how is that chosen?
Through central administration. It's scoped at the application, the web application. So if you where you see the button in central administration for administrative settings, you basically pull a drop down, and one of the options there is resource throttle. And there's a number of, like I say, the list view threshold, and that one's a big one. There are a number of thresholds that might even be worth examining at some point, but they're all in there.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing, and I think that's what you said about your blog post is what most people do. It's kind of reporting on what you've experienced, and I know that usually someone else is going through the same thing, like Laura.
Some are more focused than mine is really what I'm saying. I'm kind of all over the map.
Oh, yes, like diving, right? I think you have diving.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, and we appreciate you and your segment, so we hope to hear some more from you the next week or the next time you're on.
Cheers.
Cheers. Next up, we have Nilesh, who we've had this segment for a while. He's been talking about evaluating third-party SharePoint infrastructure. And go on, Nilesh, you have the floor.
So, thanks, Jamie. The list that you pointed to from Anders is definitely an awesome start. There's quite a lot of things to think about in here. I'm not sure if people have had a chance to look at that before or not, but it's a brilliant start. You definitely want to make sure that we are looking at third-party solutions. Some of the considerations I give them is, what is their overall background in terms of application development? How long have they been in business for? How many customers do they have? How robust are their solutions in terms of deployment processes, their support configuration, like support, for the product, during sales, after sales, how often do they upgrade their solutions? Every time when SharePoint comes up with a hotfix or a service pack, what is their solution testing, process over there? Do they only cater to large clients, small clients? That's probably my game plan over there. When I used to do, product analysis for backup and recovery purposes, or just workflow conditions, it's good to have a test case built up front on what you need, and basically analyze more than one product company on the same test case. So just to be fair to everyone, you have a test case that's equal to every vendor that you're looking at for a specific purpose. For example, when we're doing backup and recovery testing for products, we would test to see if any tool that we work with would be able to recover documents with multiple versions, with metadata, calendar items, if they were able to restore them properly, with meeting items, recurring meeting items, if they would come back or not. If they had customized UI pages, were they able to restore the pages along with any form of JavaScript or anything that you might have on the pages? Those kind of testings, it is nice to have a test plan up front that you can basically use for all vendor testing for a specific time. Other than that, you obviously want to make sure that they're following best practices in terms of giving you products that are release build and not giving you debug build modes. What is the turnaround time for bug fixes if they have any bugs? No vendor out there has any product that doesn't have a bug. but what is their process for getting bug fixes in place? Do you have to wait till the next release comes from them, or will they be able to give you patches immediately for your specific organization? So how flexible are they with their support model? That's the kind of thing I look for when I'm looking for a third-party solution.
Thanks so much, Nilesh. Are there any other things that people look for when they're evaluating third-party solutions?
I mean, obviously, some of the other things are like you have on the screen over here. What kind of impacts will they have on my web applications or my service applications? Is it something that immediately is visible to the end user? Sometimes when you deploy a solution that has a UI impact, that might immediately cause some confusion in users. So before you deploy them to, if you deploy something that's going to bring up 3 or 4 links on everybody's page or some new buttons on their websites, you want to be careful about how you deploy that out and make sure that your audience knows about what's going to happen before you deploy that solution. Generally speaking, I don't think I've seen any solutions that kind of affect our applications or databases, because as long as they are deployed as solution packages, SharePoint can pretty much roll them back. You obviously want to make sure that you're not working with a solution that's trying to modify any form of SharePoint schema or trying to put files all over your file system. You also, depending on what kind of policies that you have in your environment, if you're working from a SharePoint application, you're working within full trust or minimal trust, will that application be able to work within a minimal trust environment, or does it need custom access cache policies set up, or custom access code access security policies to be set up? So quite a lot of things to do, but I think a lot was covered in Anders' list to begin there. My big thing to take away from here would be you definitely want to have test cases up front and choose wisely from your vendors, and then go back and see what the support model is for everything.
What about new vendors that are just entering the industry that don't really have a past?
Well, as long as they're kind of filling up a niche area and something special that you haven't seen out there, they're definitely worth trying. But depending on how big your SharePoint environment is, I think you'd rather be conservative than go out there and be a cowboy. Because it just if you have a huge farm, if you go through proper development cycles and testing cycles, you might be in good shape. But if you have a new vendor, you always have the risk of how long will they be around for, and what their support model is going to be going forward. So you definitely want to make sure they have enough background in terms of the client base. And unless it's truly meeting a need that you have that you cannot solve any other way, and it's mission critical.
Got it. Thank you so much, Nilesh. You always have great insight into the background information for setting up your SharePoint platforms.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Any questions for Nilesh before we go on to our next panelist? All right, thank you once again. And we are going to move on to, I believe Chris is next. Yes. And Chris is a great tweeter. If you are not following him on Twitter, you might want to, because he always has great insights on different things going on in the industry, and usually has an opinion about it as well. So this was a latest tweet about CSS3 flexible box layout, and hopefully, that they explained it. So I'm going to give Chris the floor and tell us what he saw in this article.
All right. So I need to be careful what I put out there, because Jimmy's going to be stalking it. So, and I might have to explain it later. Here's an article published recently to Smashing Magazine, and a very popular web design blog, and I've actually done some writing with them in the past too. Anyway, so if any of you are not familiar with some of the advances in CSS3, and I used to, a couple of years ago, when I used to look at people who said they couldn't keep up with new technologies, I thought they were lazy, but then I added a kid and got married, and all of a sudden it's much more difficult. So understand that what I'm about to explain to you is a very elementary understanding of it as well. It's a very developing technology. So a real quick overview, there are a couple big trends in web design. Obviously, HTML5 and CSS3 we know about, but they break down into higher level methodologies. One of which is some of you might have heard about responsive web design, which is basically an unnecessary buzzword to describe the CSS3 media queries module from the W3C, which basically means, for those of you not familiar, I could essentially design a site and have one site and cater to many different experiences or devices that are coming to my site using just properties based on a CSS3 media query. So in other words, I can say if it is a screen device, and the screen device has a whole the whole resolution of the device has a width of no greater than 960 pixels or whatever, give it this type of layout. So essentially what can happen is many web designers are doing really cool stuff where you can essentially design one different site, and in that process, through changing a few different media queries and some CSS layout, you can design a mobile version of a site as well as a full desktop version of a site, and the user doesn't see any difference other than them just accessing on the same device. You don't have to create a subdomain for mobile content and do all that kind of stuff. So it's really cool. So that deals with device independence. So when you hear responsive web design and media queries, that only refers to devices, whether I'm on a mobile device with a fixed width or a computer or whatever. Many of you are familiar with in the past the idea of the box model in CSS, which basically comprises three main elements, four. There's width and height, which is one, padding, margin, border, and then there's the top or left positioning based on the elements next to each other. So basically what happened is that the box model is very rigid. In that article it talks about how if I were to design a certain element in my HTML markup as having a 50% width but put 20 pixels of margin on the right side of it, well, the browser isn't using that box model, is not smart enough to say, okay, you really want it to be 50% width, including the margin. So in other words, it's going to say, if you have a 1,000 pixel wide display, it's going to go, that means it's 500 pixels minus the 20 for the margin, means the whole width is 480. Hopefully that makes sense. So what it's going to do is it's going to take 50% 500 plus the 20 margin, you get 520. So basically you don't get truly flexible layouts in that way. The CSS3 flexible box model is supposed to be a way using different properties on the display attribute in CSS that allows you to do dynamic resizing inside of elements itself inside of a page. So in other words, I could basically have three different divs that I'd line up next to each other and have them a certain size, but that size is calculated on the fly by the browser itself. So I could have a variable with area, and I can say, hey, I really want each of these to be 33% of the width of this content area, including all my other margin, padding, etc. So it can dynamically resize elements instead of, and it takes into account this border, padding, and margin as well. So it's more of a complete box model, I guess you could say. The box model works very well and it's very advanced, but it doesn't provide us really independence in terms of how HTML is actually rendered on the page. So again, it's a very new concept, only supported right now, I believe, through proprietary CSS markup in browsers, and it's still waiting on approval from the W3C. I think the article that I shared is a good one, but probably not the most clear of all the possible explanations of it. So basically, long story short, CSS3 is bringing us both device independence in terms of width and presentation, as well as elements within the page itself. And it's really exciting, and I mean, if I would have had this stuff 10 years ago, it's amazing where it would be. So really, web designers coming in now, I think, have it much easier compared to when most of us started, 10 years ago or so, dealing with Netscape Navigator and IE4 and stuff. So anyway, so it's really exciting. I would suggest you look at it and read more into it. It's still very early and a very immature spec. It has a long way to go. It isn't quite at the level that the CSS3 media queries are, but it's exciting. It's exciting to know that in probably I think in IE 10 it is actually going to be supported as a standard CSS usage based on the W3C specs. That's super exciting. IE 10 is going to be very, very exciting. Microsoft has done a great job moving forward while retaining backwards compatibility with their applications. So yeah, so I was just, you read it, look into it, and think about it. It's still a couple years away, but it's certainly exciting that it's coming down the road.
Thanks so much, Chris. Always good to have insight on what's coming down the road. When is IE, or did they name a date when IE 10 will be released?
I don't know about an RTM date. It's in beta now, though. So you know, I would assume maybe within a year it'll probably be out, and I would think that's, I don't remember the time that the beta for IE 9 started, but they're starting betas now. I would assume in a year. I would assume it will probably coincide with Windows 8 release as well. So I believe IE 10 is in the Windows 8 developer release. So
It is.
yeah, so I assume they're going to come about the same time.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And I just hope everybody in the audience sees that whenever there are links there on the page, I am putting them in the chat window. So if you would like to go to the articles that are being mentioned, you can just copy those links there. Thanks again, Chris. Thank you so much. Oh, someone has something to say?
Can I just say something? This is Niraj.
Sure.
Chris, thanks, man. I hadn't heard about Netscape Navigator in a long time. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you're talking about
Blast from the past.
I completely had forgotten about that thing. Awesome.
Those were the good old days. Things were a lot simpler then.
Yeah, it just shows how old I've grown so far already.
Yep.
Thanks, buddy. Good job.
Thanks so much. I thought it was just me. I was scared to say that because I was like, maybe it's still been around and I don't know. But yeah, that was really old school. All right, so we've saved Laura for last because she's certainly not least. And hello. And Laura is so active on her blog as well, and she recently wrote a blog entry, InfoPath, formulate email link to browser form. I don't know if I need to give you presenter rights or if you want.
Sure.
Yes?
Can't hurt.
Oh,
Sure.
okay. Let's see.
Now, this is when I talked about workflows a few months ago, and I might have kind of talked about some of the same stuff then, but I'll just, basically the concept is, so you already put the link to my blog post somewhere?
I will do so.
Okay, so let me see. Did I share the wrong screen? There we go. All right. Okay, so the concept I'm going to talk about today is just basically the way you formulate URLs to be able to open up an InfoPath form that you send in emails when you use a workflow to send an email. So when you're, let me go ahead and just whip up a workflow real quick. I have this check request InfoPath form. This what I'm going to show you in the workflow can be used with a reusable workflow or just a list-based workflow. So check request. So basically, when you send somebody the email, this is what I'm going to show you is for when you want them to open the form in a browser when they open the email. Now, when you have your library and you have your browser-based forms and you want to make sure that everybody always opens up the forms in the browser whether they have InfoPath on their computer or not, then to do that you can go into the advanced settings of the library and change the setting here to force it to open in the browser no matter what. So you can do that, but changing that setting in the library has absolutely zero impact on how they get to the form if they open the link from an email. So they can open the link from the email, and it all has to do with how you formulate that hyperlink as to whether it's going to open the browser or the client. Now, one of the main reasons I don't like to use the client, just in general, I like to keep it a browser-based form and keep them in the browser is a lot of the time it's for workflows. So your workflow, if you're running a workflow on the InfoPath items, especially in cases where you're trying to write back to that actual form via workflow, you get little weird timing issues and you get little errors that say like this file is checked out and stuff like that. It's really because the InfoPath client has opened and it's not finished closing when the person saves and submits the form and closes the form. It's not quite finished closing before the workflow fires off, so the workflow gets timing issues, and that doesn't happen when you have people only open the form in the browser. So that's kind of one of the reasons I like to keep it in the browser. And it's also like just for the user experience. As some people use the browser and some people use the client, and then sometimes they can get confused and wonder why they see it. Well, I saw this button the other day and now I don't see it, and you want to kind of make it all standard. So I also try to use only the features that you can use in a browser-based form. So I'll go to my workflow and I'll do send an email. And so what you can do is, so you can create a hyperlink. So I can say, here's your form, whatever you're going to say, and then put a hyperlink in here. So click to open form. And then for the address, there is a field called URL path. So if I put this URL path field in here in the email, that will work fine. That will open the form, but that will open the form. If they have InfoPath client on their computer, it will open it in the client, and if they don't, it will open it in the browser. So this is what I'm going to show you today is how to force it to open in the browser. So I create a hyperlink. So I'll do it again, click to open form. And then I'll use, so how to get that hyperlink is I'm going to go back to the actual form itself and just open an existing form to get the hyperlink, the actual browser hyperlink. So I'm just going to copy this whole thing and open it in Notepad. So I take this URL and I dissect it in Notepad. So this is how you can kind of tell what's what. And I did this in my InfoPath book that's about to come out. I did this in one of my chapters too. So this front part tells it that it's basically using InfoPath form services, and it's using to be able to render it in the browser. The second part is that's the URL to that's the specific XML file to that one form that you want them to open. And then client installed, I have found that is not important. I don't need that in the email link. And then source is a good one because source is going to tell them where you want them to go. This is going to force them to go to a specific place after they open the form and do whatever and submit it. And by default, it's going to take them back to just that default view of the library. And in this case, I just want to take them back to the home page. So I just want to take them to this page. So I'm going to take the URL of the home page and just copy it and put it as the source. And that's how you automatically redirect them somewhere. And then default item open also, you need that for it to be able to open it in the browser. Equals 1 opens it in the browser. Okay. So then I take all these and put them back together. And I take this over to SharePoint Designer. And paste it. Now here's where I can start using variables. So like this whole thing right here, team.sharepoint911.com, blah, 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 that's my site. That's the actual current site. There is a variable for that. So if I go to not workflow variables, but workflow context, which is new in SharePoint 2010, I can go pick current site URL. So that way, this is something that you can use as like a generic standard practice across all of your different forms and anything. Well, just in general, it doesn't even have to be for forms. For anything, you can use this as part of your email URLs. And then this XML location equals, you can take this whole thing up to the end of the XML file, and that's also going to be a workflow context current item URL. And then for my source, I can take it, and that's the current site, so I can also use the current site URL for that. So now I've just made this nice and simple: current site, then current item, and then the source is the current site. That just takes them back to the home page. And I can use that as my hyperlink. So, and also, if you're going to have a workflow that's going to have like several different places where you're sending like different emails to different people at different times, what you want to do is you can have this as a variable. So you can add. What I usually do is I'll just add an extra step at the beginning of the workflow, set variables, and then I'll do set workflow variable and make up, like, call it form link or something. And then, is this redundant? Have I done this before? Is anybody like bored to death because they've already seen me do this? Not. Just want to let you know. So, but when I do it, I can do it as a variable, which makes it much more efficient, so that I don't have to do it, you know, kind of every single time I send an email. So let me just whip this up real quick and show you how you make it a variable and put it in the email. So current item URL and then current site URL. All right, and then I have to actually make it a hyperlink here to do it this way. Make that a hyperlink, and then click here to open form or whatever you want it to say. Okay, and then, so now that that's a variable, then in all my emails, instead of having to do all that stuff with formulating the hyperlink and putting all the current site, current item, and all that, I can just insert my form link right there and just do it in all the different places. And you can, yeah, so you can do the same concept with like an email subject that is similar in lots of different emails and things like that. Another thing real quick is that there's this new this task process designer in SharePoint Designer 2010 Enterprise, and the task process designer is a whole workflow inside of a workflow. And so one of the most common questions I see in SharePoint is, how do you configure that open this task button? You know, when you assign a task to somebody and they get the email and it says click open this task to open your task, but it's not an actual hyperlink. They have to actually click the button in the Outlook email to open this task. If they don't have Outlook, they're not going to have the button, and if they're on like an iPad or something, they're not going to have the button. So that's really frustrating. So here's how you can go in and actually click to open this task, make it an actual hyperlink. So I created this start approval process was the action that I used in SharePoint Designer. And then I can go into this change behavior as single task. Again, this is all a workflow inside of a workflow. You can completely customize the way this whole task process works. So this might look familiar here, this email. Y'all ever seen this before? This is the one you get when you get a task assigned to you. Well, in here you can completely customize it. So here's where it says use the open this task button to mark the task as completed. So I can go in and also make this a hyperlink. So I can just use my little hyperlink button and say, okay, so where do I want them to go? So let me go find my tasks list, and I have to Laura tasks. See what the URL is going to be. So it's feedbacksite/list/Laura tasks. And then this is where I need to just make sure I put the hyperlink to that task list. So I have current task is one of my data sources here. So I have to use, this is what I'm going to use to be able to send them the URL to that actual task. So I have put the hyperlink in here, and I'm just going to use my current site URL again, and then /list/Laura task. And then it's edit form.aspx ID equals, and then that's where I can use the current, it's not the current item, it's the current task ID. So this will take them to that specific task that they've been assigned for the current task. And that's the next thing that I'm going to blog on. So on my last blog for the hyperlink for the InfoPath form, I stated that I was going to write some more blog posts. So this is what the next blog post is going to be on. So y'all can look forward to that if I went through it too fast. That's all. Kind of fast, huh? Throw a little extra bonus in there for y'all. It's all recorded, so you can just like watch it in slow motion later.
Speaking of which, Laura, I'm going to share your last week's segment, which was controlling the center of SharePoint announcements. That we actually have that segment recorded, and it will be up on YouTube this evening.
Cool.
So, but that's the link that if you want to watch in slow-mo right now, you can use that link and watch it.
I didn't talk quite so fast last week, I don't think, but this time I had a lot more to show, so anyway.
Oh, that was awesome. There's a question for you, and I'm going to share it with the group, and it says, do you need enterprise for that?
Yes. In the okay, so let me show you what the task actions are, since you can still see my screen. If I go to the action drop-down, these are all the task actions, these 6 that you see here. If you have only if you have enterprise, you're going to see these last 3 that I'll start with the word start. So if you don't have enterprise, you're going to get those same 3 task actions you've always had from SharePoint 2007, which are less customizable.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, thank you, Laura, as always. And what we're trying to do now is cut up all the segments and get them recorded for everyone within 1 week's time. So we have another one of Laura's, and then you can watch in slow-mo next week, as well as all of our other panelists' segments. So anything else, Laura, before I take back the floor?
No, take it.
Okay. All right. So we're going to open up the floor for live questions now. I don't want to show my screen. I want to show this. Okay. And so for live questions, you can either raise your... Oh, I see a hand raised. So maybe there's already a question that's out there. Let's see. George, you have the floor. You can ask your question.
Hi, George Winters again. I was going to ask the access services in Microsoft SharePoint 2010. The last time I was at a SharePoint Saturday, and I mentioned access services to someone who was teaching an InfoPath demonstration, and they kind of made a face.
Yeah.
What did you mention to them?
I just wondered, is it a viable platform for designing web applications with SharePoint? Does it have limitations, and if so, what are they?
Yeah, access.
Yeah, I'll take it to you also when you're done.
Please do. Well, first of all, you need enterprise for it. I don't know if it's a compelling reason to buy enterprise. But I look at it as it might be a nice way to take some of those old access applications that are lying around and move them up into SharePoint. I was sure as hell wouldn't go designing things using it. I could be wrong on that, but it's pretty customized and pretty proprietary to Access. It lets you use Access as a design client for a site. That's my take on it. I have not used it in production, and I don't see any reasons I should.
Yeah, this is Laura. I agree with what you were saying about existing ones. So if you have a bunch of existing databases and you want them to put them to SharePoint, make them more freely available to more people and things like that, upload them and publish them to SharePoint. But I wouldn't go creating new ones using it, because he's right, it's very proprietary. Now, it also depends on the skill set at your company. So if you have like a whole team of Access developers, Access people who know Access very well and can just whip up the applications quickly, then that might be a compelling reason to do it for new ones. If you have more Access people maybe than you have SharePoint people, because when you do it this way, when you create one in Access, you can only edit like the structure and the tables in Access. You can't just go to like SharePoint and click Create Column or anything. You're stuck with Access. Another problem with the existing databases is that you have that design checker that you have to go through. And I've taken existing databases that I created years ago, and it's like, oh, well, I'll just see what happens when I put this in SharePoint. And that design checker killed me because I had about like 60 different things I had to go through, and it's very picky as to what is going to be web compatible from existing databases. Like, you can't have any like weird symbols like pound signs or anything in your fields, and just all kinds of little things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so one thing that I learned is that if you're going to do a new database, and you know that you're going to put it in SharePoint, when you click to open access and you click the new database button, be sure and click the new web database button. And that way, as you develop it, it'll automatically all be web compatible.
Right, it'll enforce all of those.
Yeah, and if you don't have a web database one, then you know that little welcome form? You know, you can say designate a certain form as a welcome form in Access. Like,
not yet, but I hope to. Okay.
Well, you said you're the Access guru. So
yeah.
So you pick a certain form in your database and you say this is the form I want people to automatically see when they open Access. You know, you don't have that if you don't have a web database, and you put it in SharePoint, you don't get the welcome form option. So even if you have an existing database that's not a web one, I recommend creating a new database as a web database and then importing all the tables and queries and everything into it, so that you can have a welcome form. Or otherwise, the users are going to be prompted with just a list of tables or something when they go to the site.
Okay. I guess my big challenge with going from thinking in Access to thinking in SharePoint was the challenges with the lookup columns. Not being able to create, I guess I'd have to call it a join between two SharePoint lists.
You can in 2010.
Yeah. In fact, there's 2010 features that were put in there just to support this Access services, right? Like the pseudo referential integrity that's in there, and and the unique.
But I do want to have one comment. It said I don't think SharePoint is a replacement for Access. It's not a relational database.
That's true. That's true.
So it's meant for document-centric solutions, in my opinion, and not relational solutions involving relational data.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, but you can use duct tape to make it sort of
Yeah.
that way.
Well,
I see it as a bit of an intermediary if you've got a little bit of, if you've got list-based data in Access, and I think most Access applications out there are just that. This lets you get it into SharePoint in a familiar way, and I think you can move away from it. You know, it's an intermediary step, yes.
Oh, don't get me started. Concurrency.
I never said industrial strength.
Whoa.
It's better than sticking the MDB file in a document library.
Oh, God.
It's an answer.
okay.
Well, thank you so much, George. I wanted to bring up Mark's question because I might have missed it while Laura was presenting. Were you able to see his question there, Laura?
I
just said this.
It says I am able to see the 3 actions.
I think he's talking about the drop-down menu on the workflow choices.
That sounds interesting. I haven't seen those actions when I didn't have Enterprise, so I'm not sure.
Maybe it's standard. Does that person have standard edition?
Oh, it's possible. What version do you have?
Oh, let me see it. Maybe I sent Mark an audio pen. Hopefully, you can speak, or you can type what you kind of. Mark? I don't know.
So maybe I should have said not foundation.
I'm not certain which one has. Okay, there you go. There you go, Mark.
We definitely do not have Enterprise. I believe Foundation.
Really?
And the actions that I'm referring to, I just want to make sure I understood you correctly, was when you drop down, I can see start approval process, start custom test, and start feedback process.
Right. The thing about that is those task processes, they all create info path browser-based forms, which you're not going to have if you don't have enterprise. So
Right.
it doesn't make any sense.
Well, no, in these days, I think that was a debate, but for the purpose of workflow forms and even forms for lists, info path is allowed.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be the full enterprise services to get that info path capability.
Okay.
Yeah, you.
I didn't know it was down to Foundation. I thought it was in standard, to be honest with you.
I don't know. I guess, Mark, try and create a workflow and try using it and create let it use an initiation form and all that stuff and see what it looks like.
Yeah, we didn't say we can't learn stuff, too.
Because I had tried it out in Foundation and it never was there, so that's interesting.
Okay. I'll try it.
All right.
And I did write an article about the task process designer. It's on my blog. I'll read it.
Laura, that could have been a beta thing, too. I know they were having that
Ooh.
debate right until the end, right, as to
That's true.
what capabilities they were going to put in Foundation.
That could have been because when I was writing my book, the beginning SharePoint 2010, that was in beta, and that's when I was testing all those different things. And so, yeah, you're right.
I'd be curious as to the mechanism because Designer's a client-side app, right? How is it checking the license? Or is it check? I've never seen them do that.
Maybe the enterprise features on the site?
Maybe. Yeah, it could be looking, but.
Yeah. No. So a lot of those actions you get are based on like features being. I don't know. I'm getting another Foundation site for 2010 soon, and I'll test that again. So.
Well, I